There is something about California in 1965 that people who lived through it cannot forget. The endless beaches stretching along the Pacific, the orange groves covering the valleys with their sweet scent, the surfers riding waves at Malibu and Huntington, the highways filled with chrome and steel, the feeling that anything was possible. And if someone held a kilogram of silver in their hands in 1965, then they knew exactly what that metal could buy. This was a time when silver still had real value, when a kilogram of the metal represented serious purchasing power, when the price was fixed by government regulation at 1.29 per ounce, when silver coins still clinked in pockets across America. When that kilogram, properly sold, could transform into tangible goods and services that defined the California dream. This was the year when California was the golden land, when the population was exploding, when Silicon Valley was still called Santa Clara Valley, and grew fruit instead of technology, when Los Angeles sprawled endlessly under smog and sunshine, when San Francisco was the most beautiful city in America and everyone knew it. This was also the era when the automobile ruled California, when the freeways were new and promised freedom, when gas cost 30 cents a gallon, when chrome-covered machines with V8 engines cruised the boulevards. Let's walk through what that kilogram of silver could actually purchase in California during that unforgettable year. Let's step into that world. Holding 1 kilogram of silver in California in 1965 meant holding approximately 32.15 troy ounces of pure metal. The official price was fixed. Silver traded at $1.29 per ounce throughout most of 1965, held there by government policy and the Treasury's willingness to sell at that price. A kilogram of silver sold at the going rate would bring approximately $41.47. That doesn't sound like much today, but in 1965, $41 and some change represented real money. Money that could buy substantial things. Money that opened doors. The purchasing power of that amount was considerable in an economy where the median household income was around $6,900 per year, where a worker making $4,658 annually was earning the national average wage. $41 was almost a full week's wages for many working Californians. Housing in California in 1965 was still affordable, though prices were rising. The median home price nationally was around $21,500 that year. In California, prices ran somewhat higher, but a decent house in Los Angeles could be purchased for $25,000 to $30,000. A small starter home might cost $18,000 or $20,000. That kilogram of silver sold for $41.47 would represent about 1/5 of 1% of a modest home's purchase price. It would cover a few months of mortgage payments. The typical mortgage payment on a $20,000 home with a 20% down payment and a 30-year mortgage at 5% interest might run around $80 per month. That silver would cover nearly half a month's housing payment. Not insignificant. For renters, the silver was worth more in relative terms. A decent apartment in Los Angeles or San Francisco might rent for $120 to $150 per month. The silver would cover a week to 10 days of rent. A modest apartment could be had for $100 per month in smaller cities. The silver would pay for almost 2 weeks of shelter. Transportation was where that kilogram of silver showed real purchasing power. Gasoline in California in 1965 cost around 30 to 31 cents per gallon, sometimes less during gas wars when stations competed for customers. The silver converted to 41.47 would purchase approximately 234 gallons of gasoline. That was serious driving. A typical car of the era, a Chevrolet Impala or Ford Galaxy, might get 12 to 15 miles per gallon. That 134 gallons would propel the car between 1,600 and 2,000 miles. From Los Angeles to San Francisco and back 3 times. From San Diego to the Oregon border and back. From the coast to the Nevada border and back 4 times. The silver bought freedom of movement across California's vast distances. A new car was another matter entirely. The average new car in 1965 cost around $2,500. A Ford Mustang, the sensation of the decade, could be purchased for $2,668. A Chevrolet Impala listed at around $2,700. A Volkswagen Bug, economical and popular, cost $1,395. The kilogram of silver at $41.47 represented about 1.7% of the cost of a new car. It would cover a single car payment if the vehicle was financed. It would pay for new tires all around, perhaps with money left over. A set of 4 good tires might cost $80 to $100. The silver would cover half of that expense. Used cars were more accessible. A decent used car from the late 1950s or early 1960s could be purchased for $600 to $800. The silver represented 5 to 7% of that purchase price. Put 20 kilograms of silver together, and the used car was yours. Food was inexpensive in 1965 California. The silver would buy substantial quantities of groceries. A gallon of milk cost 1.05. The silver would purchase almost 40 gallons. Enough milk to last a family of 4 for 3 months. A loaf of white bread cost 21 cents. The silver would buy almost 200 loaves. A dozen eggs cost 53 cents. The silver would purchase almost 80 dozen eggs. A pound of ground beef might cost 45 to 50 cents. The silver would buy 80 to 90 pounds of beef. Enough meat for months of dinners. A restaurant meal was affordable. A good dinner at a mid-range restaurant might cost $3.50 to $4 per person. The silver would pay for dinner for 2 at a nice restaurant, with enough left over for drinks and perhaps dessert. A fast food meal, a hamburger, fries, and a Coke might cost 75 cents. The silver would buy 55 such meals. A chicken dinner at a fried chicken place, a bucket with sides, might cost $2.65. The silver would purchase 15 such meals. Entertainment was well within reach. A movie ticket in California in 1965 cost around $1.25 to $1.25. The silver would buy admission to the cinema for 33 to 41 people. Dinner and a movie for 2, a classic date, cost approximately $11.40 total. The silver would cover 3 such dates, with money remaining. A record album vinyl spinning at 33 RPM cost around $3.50 to $4 The silver would purchase 10 or 11 albums, enough music to build a respectable collection. The Beach Boys, the Mamas and the Papas, the Byrds, all California bands dominating the airwaves. A paperback book cost 50 to 75 cents. The silver would buy 55 to 83 books. A library of literature. Clothing was affordable. A decent man's suit might cost $40 to $60. The kilogram of silver would almost purchase a full suit, or would cover 2/3 to the full cost, depending on quality. A man's dress shirt cost $4 to $5. The silver would buy 8 to 10 good shirts. A pair of Levi's jeans, iconic California workwear, cost around $4. The silver would purchase 10 pairs. A woman's dress might cost $8 to $15. The silver would buy 3 to 5 dresses. Shoes were modest in price. Good leather shoes might cost $10 to $15 per pair. The silver would buy 3 pairs. Canvas sneakers, Keds, or Converse cost around $5. The silver would buy 8 pairs. California in 1965 was defined by the beach. The coast stretched hundreds of miles from San Diego to San Francisco and beyond. The beaches were free, open to everyone, uncrowded by later standards. Surfing was exploding as a cultural phenomenon. A good surfboard cost around $100 to $150. The silver would represent 28 to 41% of that purchase. 3 or 4 kilograms would buy the board. Surf culture permeated everything. The music, the language, the attitude, the style. Beach blankets, bikinis, woodies loaded with boards, the endless summer stretching forever. The weather was perfect. Southern California was 75 degrees and sunny 300 days a year. Northern California was cooler but spectacular, the fog rolling through the Golden Gate, the hills of San Francisco rising steep and beautiful. Los Angeles was the sprawling center of Southern California. The population was approaching 3 million in the city, 7 million in the county. The freeways were new and revolutionary. The 405, the 101, the 10, the 5, all built or being built during the 1950s and early 1960s. The car was king. Public transportation was minimal. Everyone drove everywhere. The smog was terrible, worse than today. Brown air hanging over the basin, burning eyes and throats. But nobody seemed to care much. The freedom of the automobile outweighed the pollution. Hollywood was the dream factory. The studio still operated, though television was changing everything. Movie theaters remained grand. The Chinese theater, the Egyptian, the old palaces downtown. Disneyland in Anaheim was celebrating its 10th anniversary. The park cost $4.00 for adult admission. The kilogram of silver would admit 10 people to the Magic Kingdom. San Francisco was different from Los Angeles. Compact where LA sprawled, cultured where LA was crass, old where LA was new. The city was beautiful, universally acknowledged as America's most lovely urban space. Victorian houses climbed steep hills, cable cars clanged down the slopes. The bay glittered in the sun. The Golden Gate Bridge spanned the water, rust-red and magnificent. Fisherman's Wharf sold fresh crab and sourdough bread. North Beach was the Italian neighborhood, home to beatniks just a few years earlier. The Haight-Ashbury was still a quiet residential area. That would change soon. By 1967, the summer of love would transform the neighborhood into the center of the counterculture. But in 1965, San Francisco was still recognizable to someone from 1955. The Central Valley was agricultural, the richest farming region in America, perhaps the world. The valley stretched 400 miles long and 40 to 60 miles wide. Flat, fertile, irrigated, productive. Everything grew there. Cotton, tomatoes, grapes, lettuce, almonds, oranges, peaches, rice. The farms were large operations, industrial agriculture even then. The towns were small and functional. Fresno, Bakersfield, Stockton, Modesto. The valley was hot in summer, reaching well over 100 degrees and cool in winter. The fog could be thick and dangerous, but the land produced wealth. The silver might buy a few dozen boxes of fresh produce. Oranges at 25 cents per pound, the silver would purchase 165 pounds. Tomatoes at 15 cents per pound, the silver would buy 276 pounds. Work in California in 1965 was plentiful. The economy was booming. The aerospace industry employed hundreds of thousands. Lockheed, North American Aviation, Douglas Aircraft, Hughes, all building planes and missiles, and spacecraft for the Cold War and the space race. The factories paid well. A skilled machinist might earn $3.50 per hour. The silver would represent almost 12 hours of such labor. A construction worker might earn $4 per hour. The silver represented just over 10 hours of work. A schoolteacher might earn $6,000 to $7,000 per year. The silver represented about half a week's salary. The minimum wage was $1.25 per hour. The silver represented 33 hours of minimum wage work. The universities were excellent and affordable. The University of California had multiple campuses: Berkeley, Los Angeles, Davis, Santa Barbara, Riverside, San Diego. Tuition for California residents was free. Completely free. Students paid only registration fees, perhaps $100 to $150 per year. The kilogram of silver would almost cover an entire year's fees. A semester at a UC campus could be paid for with 2 or 3 kilograms. The California State University system was similarly affordable. Community colleges charged almost nothing. Higher education was accessible to anyone willing to do the work. The GI Bill paid for many veterans. Middle-class and working-class families could afford to send children to university without going into debt. The technology industry was beginning, though nobody called it that yet. Fairchild Semiconductor was in Mountain View. Hewlett-Packard was in Palo Alto. IBM had facilities in San Jose. The companies made electronics, semiconductors, computers. The work was new, cutting-edge, poorly understood by most Californians. The orchard still covered the valley. Apricots, cherries, plums grew where office parks would soon stand. The transformation from agriculture to technology was just beginning. Within a decade, the area would be known as Silicon Valley. But in 1965, it was still a place of fruit trees and sunshine. What could 1 kilogram of silver purchase in California in 1965? The answer is substantial. Not wealth, but comfort. Not luxury, but adequacy. The silver would pay for groceries for a family for a month. It would fill a gas tank 9 or 10 times. It would buy 10 good shirts or 3 pairs of shoes. It would pay rent for a week or more. It would take a couple to dinner and the movies 3 times. It would represent a week's wages for many workers. It was enough to matter, enough to make a difference in daily life, enough to solve small problems or provide small pleasures. The conversion rate matters. At $1.29 per ounce, that kilogram brought 41 pounds 40 hours. But the government's price control was about to end. By 1968, silver would be deregulated. By 1974, it would trade at $4 per ounce. By 1980, the Hunt brothers would drive it to $48 per ounce. That same kilogram would be worth $1,540 at the peak. The purchasing power would multiply 37 times. But that was in the future. In 1965, silver was still controlled, still affordable, still something that could be held and spent and converted to everyday goods. California in 1965 was optimism, the sense that tomorrow would be better than today, that progress was inevitable, that prosperity would continue expanding, that the American dream was real and achievable, the economy was growing, jobs were plentiful, housing was affordable by later standards, education was accessible, the future seemed unlimited. The Beach Boys sang about fun, fun, fun. The mamas and the papas harmonized about California dreaming. The surf was up and the sun was shining and the highways stretched to the horizon. For those who lived in California during 1965, there are memories that remain. The smell of orange blossoms in the spring. The taste of salt spray at the beach. The sound of engines and music and waves. The feel of hot sun on skin. The sight of palm trees and freeways and mountains rising behind the cities. The sense of being in the right place at the right time. The knowledge that California was where the future was being invented. That kilogram of silver sold at the regulated price of $1.29 per ounce could purchase $41 worth of that California dream. It could buy freedom of movement, meals for the table, entertainment and clothing and shelter. It could transform metal into memory. For those with recollections of this era in California, there is always more history to explore.